Testing. We got a new mic, so I gotta figure this out. How the volume is. You gotta let me know. You gotta let me know how the volume is with the new mic. Do I need to turn it? All right, it sounds okay. It sounds okay for on my. It's more important. Is it too loud? Volume sound good, guys? Just checking. All right, I'm gonna assume it sounds all right. So, I mean, basically in the last day, what happened was Hispaniola wasn't really that much of a problem. Basically, basically we've been talking about how long it's going to be staying over land. How is that going to be a massive issue? And what's happened is we saw this little westward jog, and then it started to move northeast, and now we've seen this kind of movement today, and so it's avoided all this heavy terrain problems. This part of the country is where a lot of the terrain problems are in terms of highest elevations in the state. So now what we've been seeing is it's just been able to take off straight away. Every storm is different. Every system is different. So it's hard to always predict how these land interactions are going to go, and it's really difficult. It's really difficult to predict what's going to happen with these land interactions. Sometimes they're able to take off right away. Sometimes they just take a little bit longer, even if they don't go over a lot of mountainous terrain, etc. It's just they get really complicated sometimes, and they can be really hard to forecast, especially for models. But it's been able to get going pretty soon after it went back into the ocean. The eye did. We saw it intensify into a Category 2, all the way up to a Category 2 hurricane this afternoon into the evening with the 5 o'clock update, or was it 8 o'clock? One or the other. Either way, this evening it intensified, and with the 11 p.m. advisory, now we got a 110 mile per hour hurricane, 971 mile per hour, or 97. That would be crazy, but 971 millibar, 971 millibar hurricane. So, it's relatively, it was a strong. It's been the whole storm. It's been relatively weak pressure relative to the winds. It's been like that whole storm. It's like a 1005 millibar storm with like 60 mile an hour winds. Like basically the most of the storm it was, most of its life cycle it was, traveling through the Leeward Islands and then into the Caribbean until it intensified rather quickly, about 20, 25 miles an hour, made landfall in Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, and now we are here. The good news is we don't have to worry about any U.S. impacts with this storm. It would take a 1 in a million shot, and personally, I wouldn't put any bets down. So that's the good news. That's the good news with this storm, is that it's going to become an intense hurricane, and Bermuda is going to have to could burn a significant punch from this one, but we're not going to be worrying about any U.S. impacts. I would put a lot of money on that, like a 99.9% chance that we're not going to see any U.S. impacts, which is very good news. However, we are going to expect a track over the next coming days, something like this. We think more like in this area, Atlantic Canada, Newfoundland, even probably farther east than that. I was even a little too close. You can put your dollar down. You're just probably going to lose your dollar. But it depends on how important you value each dollar. But yeah, again, we're going to probably see something like this. Probably something like that. Anywhere from, here to like here is probably possible. Yeah, anywhere in that range. It's probably the most likely outcomes. But it is going to become a really intense hurricane. It's going to become a pretty intense hurricane. Like we could be talking, that this could flirt with Category 5. It wouldn't shock me. Anytime you say Category 5, everybody just goes berserk. But the environment's there. The way the outflow, the way the outflow channels are set up for the storm, it could be a pretty big time. Either mid-grade, high-end Cat 4, or it even could flirt with Cat 5. It wouldn't shock me, because it's already almost a major hurricane right now. It's 110 miles an hour. It did not take long for it to go off land. But I will say, I don't know if at the moment we're going to see any insane intensification. And also, we will be talking about that next potential system, like down the road to that too. Oh yeah, we're getting into it. We're gonna break it down tonight. We're gonna lay the groundwork and just take a look at the general environment that models are coming up with right now. So we are going to look at that next system, which the National Hurricane Center has listed 30% chance. But first, we're just going to go over all the Fiona stuff, because this stuff's, when you have the 110 mile per hour hurricane in the Atlantic, no matter where it is, it's pretty fascinating. It's because it's just Mother Nature at her strongest. Recon's been going through it. Recon, we've had hurricane hunters in there. We've had JetBlue in there. JetBlue's been doing some really good work. They've been, JetBlue passenger flights they've been doing some really good recon this evening, I saw. So that's a discussion. We're not going to go into the debate of that, the ethics of that, but JetBlue social media intern was also having some fun with that, I see. But we got it looks like the system is not completely stacked at the moment. It's not the center is not completely stacked. Wait, did I read that? Actually, pretty close. It wasn't as much as it looked like when it. Okay, more information. This helps. It wasn't completely stacked on the last run, but ever since they did it, you can see right here, it's not perfect. When we're looking for storms as powerful as this one's going to become and is currently, we're looking for this to be, it has to be near perfect if it's going to be, all the meteorological stuff that we talk about. It has to be near perfect. And right here and then right here, it was just a little off. Now it looks a little bit more in line. This looks pretty good. And we've seen some rings of convection that's been firing up around this bad boy tonight too. If you take a look here, we'll update. We'll delete that. But even though the eye has been cooling a little bit, even though the eye's coming, it's coming a little bit less visible on IR, you can still see the rings of convection that have been starting to fire around. And typically, that's not normal for a storm that's trying to intensify, because the rings of convection are trying to wrap around the eye that is moving. It is moving west-northwest, so it is moving. And when those rings of convection fire around, they can kind of go over the eye at sometimes and kind of cover it up. So if the eye is right here, the rings of convection are kind of covering it by firing up so intensely around it. And it's moving, the storm is, and the rings of convection around the eye are also moving as well. And they're moving around the system counterclockwise. I always mess that up. Yes, counterclockwise. That's important. You don't want to mess that up. So they're moving counterclockwise around the eye, rotating, and sometimes they can just kind of cover up over the eye, which can delay like the actual current metrics in terms of intensification, especially because the warmer the eye, the lower the dew point in the eye, the more rapid falls in pressure you tend to see. But with the convection wrapping around, this from IR, it looks pretty good right now. Like it's primed to continue to intensify overnight, and we're entering diurnal maximum, which is, we call it Dmax, which is the strongest period for convection. Probably right now is not the strongest, technically not the peak of Dmax, but we'll probably see that peak of Dmax. We'll probably see that in the early morning hours tonight. And that's probably, I think, when we'll see this thing take off, really take off. It wouldn't shock me if we woke up and this thing was, flirting with Cat 4, or even was Cat 4. This thing, I wouldn't shock me if this was Cat 4 by the 11 a.m. advisory tomorrow. It wouldn't shock me even if this was a mid-grade Cat 4 by the 11 a.m. advisory tomorrow. I said it a little earlier in the stream not too long ago that I think this thing could flirt with Cat 5. But the one thing that makes me think otherwise is an eye wall replacement cycle. Hasn't happened yet. It's been intensifying over today. It's probably not ready for an eye wall replacement cycle right now, but at some point over the next day or two, it's probably going to undergo an eye wall replacement cycle because it's just not going to be able to sustain this strength for that long. So it's probably going to want to undergo an eye wall replacement cycle at some time, or you'll see me reference it on Twitter as an EWRC, which is what acronym, and we'll see that happen at some point probably. So if there's something that does prevent it, that would probably be the main thing. I think it does, and it's not that it weakens the storm; it really doesn't. You'll see it quick. The pressure probably won't rise too much. Sometimes it does a little bit. But you'll see the winds go down, but the maximum area of winds will get wider. So if they were here before, they'll extend out farther, and we'll see the radii for the wind extend out farther. That's what happens on an eye wall replacement cycle. And typically, the storm surge numbers can go up when you see eye wall replacement cycles too. Very common misconception. Even though sometimes the category number will go down for an eye wall replacement cycle, that does not mean the storm is weakening. Hurricane Katrina is the prime example of that. Because, water doesn't just go away. Obviously, if we saw something like a 100 mile per hour, like 120 mile per hour hurricane go and weaken to like a 60 mile per hour tropical storm, obviously that's gonna decrease the storm surge somewhat, just because the winds are pushing water literally from the ocean onto land. So if it's like weakening that much, it's gonna make a difference. But when we see it go from like 180. 170, something 175 that strong to like 130, 140 mile per hour, like Katrina did when it made its landfall. The water's still going to push pretty far. It's like a wall of water that's just getting ready to push, and so it's not just going to fade away. So that's a common misconception with eye wall replacement cycles, that it weakens the storm. You can see some short-term weakening, but the eye is going to get stronger. In terms of, when I mean stronger, I mean it's going to be able to stand off wind shear and those dry air intrusions to the core. It's going to be able to fight those off a lot better too. That's another thing about eye wall replacement cycles. If you get a large eye, yes, it's not going to be able to take off as fast in terms of rapid intensification, but if it's already strong enough at that point, then you're not going to have, if it's a 150 mile per hour hurricane, it's over pretty safe environment. It doesn't have to be even perfect. It's going to hold its intensity until maybe it's ready for an even bigger eye wall replacement cycle, which there's plenty of fascinating case studies with that. So I just, it's good to go over eyeball replacement cycles again. We're talking especially about this system because we'll probably see one at some point. We'll see some sort of eyeball replacement cycle. But yeah, it's good to get the tracking in for this one for sure. We don't have to worry about um, any big time U.S. impacts. Probably surf will go up on the East Coast. That will be something. So if you want to go out to a beach this week or this weekend, um, hopefully you're keeping busy during the week. If you have enough time to go to the beach during the week, you're lucky. But uh, do be advised. There'll probably be some surf. Surf will be high. You'll probably see some red flags on the beach flying. Actually, most lifeguards probably aren't there after Labor Day, but just if you are, if it does impact you or anybody will be something to watch. All right, let's get into the next one. Let's get into this one right here. This tropical wave, just sitting out, just sipping out in the MDR. That's the one I think that's caught everyone's attention today, given the long range model. Long range model runs are, they're not perfect. they're gonna mess stuff up. They're not designed to nail things down. But given that there's consistency from the short range to the medium range into the long range, that's what more catches my eye than anything else. It's not, models, have something firing up here and then another one has something firing up here. It's not like this and like this, two completely different things, which I guess we could both be on the table, I guess, but both, major models, the Euro and the GFS, and even other models are showing this tropical wave, even if it's not intensifying significantly, being able to push here across the Caribbean, across the lower latitudes of the Caribbean, and then eventually find its way to either, go over the Yucatan, over Cuba potentially, or even split the two through the canal. I forget the name. Can't remember the name that canal, but split the two and just work its way eventually into the U.S. Obviously, if it gets into here, given the time of year, it's given the current jet stream patterns we have in the U.S., at some point this is going to be able to force. It's not going to be able to just sit down here and go into Mexico. It's going to be forced somewhere into the U.S. So that's something to watch down the line. Most likely, unless the models were crazy off. So we'll take a look at some of the models and what they got. I guess we can even break down the current GFS. That's Fiona right there. That's Fiona. If you guys do have questions, you can put them into the chat, and I'll probably get to them at some point, or I'll address them live if it's about what I'm talking about currently. Just feel free to do that. We even want to go into tropical because we want to look at it right now. Here we go. Yep, here we go. Yep, there's our wave. So it's not a lot right now. It's not even really that visible. This is, it's yellow. We don't want to go yellow on yellow. Boom, this is it right here. It's too big. Yeah. That's our vorticity right now. That's what we're working with. You look at it and you go, oh, that's not a lot. Given that it's not a lot and models are picking up on this, GFS really struggled. There was more than this with the last one with Fiona. There was more than this. in terms of the tropical cyclone genesis that took place, and the GFS still didn't pick up the fact that there's this much we're looking at in terms of the current VORT depiction, and models are picking this up in terms of being a potential development, a viable development option. That's immediate red flag for something that could potentially develop based on what we've been seeing in terms of models handling tropical cyclone genesis. That's immediately something that's got my eye. And we can see, well, this is 18Z. Damn it. You can see it took, strengthened a little bit from the last, previous run. No, that's not what we want. From 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. You can see it a bit stronger. It's really south in latitude here, but you can see it strengthen. It's starting to strengthen a little bit. And when I say strengthen, it's not like spinning up right now. It's just it's a convective area that we're watching for development. And we're looking to see how organized the spin and how tight the spin is going to get. Or we're going to be looking for spin eventually. It's not even spinning currently. We're just looking at a convective blob of thunderstorms right now in this area. And eventually we're going to look for it to get tighter, more organized thunderstorms, and eventually to the point where we'll start to see these thunderstorms rotating, not like tornadoes. The actual area of thunderstorms rotating, not an area of the thunderstorm rotating. It's not how it works. It's not like tornadoes. Tornadoes and hurricanes are not related, although they can happen at the same time. Which, if there is a U.S. impact, we'll probably discuss that at some point. But it looks like it starts to strengthen tomorrow night. I guess even trying to close off a contour there. Oh, we're looking at, Jesus, 500 millibars. What was I doing? Oof. Yeah, that's why I wasn't so visible. Well, listen, we have made greater mistakes in life. At least it was just 500. It was still, technically all I was saying was just true. It was just a little bit higher point in the atmosphere. We like to look at the surface. So this is our current, and this is much more, this makes a little bit more sense. This is visible, and it's not a lot. It's not a lot that's picking up on. And everything I still said pretty much applies. It's just it's a weak tropical wave right now that, oh no, we don't even need to do that. That did, starting to get a little bit more organized, and that's what we're going to look for. You can see at 500 it was getting a little bit more organized. But 500 is not as important as 850, and we can see it closes off. And I guess this is probably, a couple of days from now, I guess that's when we have to start watching for development. National Hurricane Center doesn't even have it listed for potential development, and I think this is even stronger than that. No, it's not. A little bit, moving a little bit faster. You can see the last, 3 runs. That's more importantly over the next 48 hours. Even though it doesn't even have an L there, it does have the tropical wave there. Over the last 4 runs, it's at a visible either borderline tropical depression or a tropical wave or strong tropical wave. So this is something that has to be watched even over the next couple of days potentially for development. I think National Hurricane Center could potentially boost those odds. We'll take a look at the euro. Euro's usually the euro's a bit behind. It was a little bit different with Fiona, but usually the euro is a bit behind with tropical cyclone genesis. It has been for the last couple of years now. See, the euro's a little bit weaker, so I bet but each run getting stronger. You can visibly see that with the GFS. GFS a bit more consolidated, obviously. But GFS and Euro both have that very much present and potentially a threat to develop at some point over the next 2 to 3 days. So it's possible that NHC could be playing a little bit of catch up here, or they're just playing it conservative. Um, maybe they don't want to draw too much attention away from Fiona at the moment. Usually people are pretty good at being able to identify the threats to them, but if Fiona's not a threat to the U.S. and people start seeing the 200 to 300 hour range of these model runs, they're going to take off and they're going to run with them. So don't 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 expect that people aren't going to do that. They're going to want to follow all these 200 to 300 hour range model runs. So that's what people interest them, because there's a lot more predictability for error in those model runs at that range, and a lot less people want to look at reality sometimes. Will I still get it? Okay, that works. I guess it's even still visible. Kind of isn't, kind of not. But you can see Euro, it starts to strengthen this wave a little bit. So if we look at the environment, low level depiction is pretty good. Euro's a lit. It's not, the resolution's not quite as good. It's not as tight and confined. It was a better way of saying it. You can see the GFS. It's a little bit slower with it. A little bit farther east at the moment. It's a little bit slower with its development and has it getting a bit stronger. When we look at the environment, what excites me about this in terms of it being able to develop, when I say excite, not excited that it's going to form and do something bad or something. That's not what I'm saying when I said. What gets me leads me to think that this thing has a really good shot of becoming something truly what models are trying to depict is this moisture field right away. I mean, the moisture field, part of it is what's left behind from Fiona. Fiona's really moistening the Caribbean up, and what happens is there's some dry air associated on the northwest side, and that's probably what limits this from really just intensifying, taking off right away. But what makes me think that this thing is gonna be able to sustain itself and potentially be something of serious consequence down the line is this moisture bubble. We talk about wind shear is the thing that needs to transport dry air to affect these systems a lot of times. Even without the dry air, it can still tilt the system to an extent and prevent significant intensification. But that can only happen for so long because wind shear doesn't stay the same for the whole storm. As the storm is moving, and wind shear, the pockets of wind shear is moving as well. So there is that. But this moisture bubble is going to be insane. I mean, this is only 6 days out or whatever. It looks like it is a bit stronger than last one, a little bit farther south in latitude, but probably because it gets going a little bit later. But the moisture bubble it's even stronger on this run. But if I play it on each run, it's not visible on that run, but each run that it's been a threat. You can see that the moisture around the system has been really good. Looking at the mid to upper level, it's borderline low level. We're looking at the relative humidity from 7 to 300 millibars in the atmosphere. You can see this is a lot of moisture for the storm to work with. And then if we look at the winds, that is what stands out. It's just a complete lack of wind shear in this environment. It's just a beautiful environment for this storm to get going in. If I play it to the last run, I mean, this is just a really good environment. You can see our upper level anticyclone over here. It's just a really good environment for the storm to work in. So that's what makes me think that this storm has the potential, to be a problem down the line. One second. Go back to satellite for a second of Fiona. It looks like the eye is starting to clear again. I was telling you, those walls of convection were just kind of covering over the eye, but this thing looks like it's getting ready to take off. The center looks really good. Looks pretty stacked. What we got now? Look at the surface. Oh, major. This thing might be major already. Wow. It's not suspect at all. It's not sus reading. No sus reading on this one. It looks like Fiona might be major. Well, all right, but we'll bring it back. You know what? We'll get into Fiona again after we look at this. You break apart Fiona like every 10 minutes. You can drive yourself nuts. You look at every little thing. You can just drive yourself crazy. But it's the lack of wind shear. I mean, there's just no wind shear to be found. Yeah, again, it's not just one model run though. If I go back to the 12Z Euro, it's not just the GFS. You can see there's just every model advertising a real lack of wind shear. I go to the CMC. It's different. It's different. It doesn't quite strengthen it as much. I guess 0Z. You can see it here, but it's because the storm it pulls it pretty south and doesn't let it. Which I guess is one solution. If it's not able to strengthen it right away, it just gets pulled south and towards Nicaragua. That is possible, I guess. One possible solution. But even then, you can see the upper level anticyclone, and you can just see it's a beautiful, beautiful environment for the storm to strengthen, which is why I think that this is going to be something to watch. This is really going to be something to watch, and it's not just model runs putting 940 millibar hurricanes in the Gulf. That's not what it is. It's the environment itself. You can't just look at the reflectivity on the model. You can't just look at that. You gotta look at why it's showing that. And there's a lot of good reasons why it's showing that. And I'll even go into look at rising and sinking air. We'll slide into the world. You slide into the world, you can get, here we go, not available, damn it, here we go. And you can see, I guess it doesn't align quite as well. It's not, 18Z will show up better. You can see the sinking air with Fiona. That's what we look for. We look for these, regions of the atmosphere, sinking air. And I don't know, I don't know the science completely behind this model, this feature of the GFS model, or just the models in general. I'm not completely familiar about it, but I do know about the sinking and the rising air and how tropical cyclones, we tend to see these dark green shades we look for are potential areas where that favor tropical cyclone development. There is that. It's not even perfect. Not even looking like this is a reason we look for development here. It's almost like it creates its own. The environment itself is just good enough. Something I take a look at. It's more something. It's a better feature to use for when you're looking at when there's nothing relevant and you're looking for potential areas to develop. Something you would combine with like the MJO, etc. When you're looking at potential time frames that you could have to watch for development. But it's worth a look. Go back to 0Z. And typically you don't want to go any farther. Then the 5-day range is fine. That's typically only how far you want to go. But we want to look at each scenario and what it plays out eventually, because eventually time's going to happen. You could die tonight, but time's going to continue to go on. So we have to look at these things to see how it plays out. I'm generally curious because I like to know the biases of the models in the long range as well. What can I pick apart? That I think that's important as well. This model run is going to pull it. Looks like pretty east. Looks like this is going to be something Cuba. And eventually down the line with this system, I talked about it's the time of year where the jet stream is pretty relevant. Late September it starts to become a little bit more active again. And you can see here we have a trough right here. And if I even break this down, if we were to look at it like just wintertime, what goes wrong with this system? I'm going to go to 18Z. This system is not just it's just not quite able to get its act together. It looks like on models. It's a little late with the timing of the phase and everything. And it's just not able to get its system. So this would be a miss in the wintertime, this one. This is, you can see, this is where you would get your cold air injection from. It's just a little late, the timing and everything. So it's a bit off. That wouldn't be a hit in the wintertime. That wouldn't be. Looked like models were trying to get closer, but just all a bit phased. But it's the trough stays positive for too long. It's still positive at this point. If you're positive at this latitude, oof, it's even a little bit more like this. If you're positive at this point, yeah, that's we don't like that for snowstorms. We want to be ideally at least neutral at this point, especially because eastern, where I live, in this part. If we can at least go neutral, by here, and then we can go negative at the trough. Once we're like at this point, at that point we can back the flow at the latter part of the storm, and we can get a nice snowstorm here in eastern. I live technically in eastern New England. Now I live on the border of everything. I live on the border of the interior. I live on the border of eastern New England. I live, close to the border of southern New England and central New England. I'm southern New England, but I live close. I'm like 45 minutes from the New Hampshire border. Yeah, like an hour, almost an hour. Relatively close. So I'm able to get in on a lot of the action depending on what different storm. I'm able to get in on something. And sometimes it just happens to be the sweet spot. It's a little bit of a combination. So that's why I like where I live for the wintertime. But we're not talking about wintertime quite yet. Still tropical season. As you can see, that run, it's 10 days out. So it's a little bit too far the range. It's probably going to show something again that's going to be, delightful for WX Twitter. That's probably how this model run goes again. But at the same time, it's more consistency. It's more consistency. That's what it is. Is it going to miss this trough? Depends on how much it slows down. Again, what I was trying to get into is, if it misses the trough, then it's probably going to linger around in the Gulf for a little bit longer. It's probably going to linger around. So it looks like models, it's, even if like it's not that perfect timing, it probably, there's a good shot. There's a good shot usually that a trough is going to pick it up. At some point, it's going to lift it off. But if it's able to miss it, then it could linger around in the Gulf for a little bit longer. And, who knows? We're talking about stalling stuff. But that's just like so far down the line. We're looking at this thing to develop first. That's what we want to try to figure out. So in the short term, but the long term, it's always the future people are interested in. It's always the future. But in the shorter term, again, this is Fiona. Fiona's going to roll out of here. In the shorter term, the environment, it's not perfect, but there's a lot of moisture. We talked about that. Plenty of moisture to go around. It's got its own little moisture bubble here, and it's able. That's what's gonna help fend off any shear from putting in dry air, because there is gonna be shear over the next 4, 5, 2, 3 days at least, and it could change a little bit depending on the depiction. But there is going to be some shear. Show you that. You can see it quite visibly here. It's probably not going to strengthen. And this is even associated a bit with Fiona to some extent. If Fiona was right here, right now, oh boy. It's obviously going to take off. It was, obviously it's right here right now. But if it was where it is, its current latitude, tomorrow, that'd be even more of a treat to watch, I think. In terms of, I should, be careful. In terms of just the meteorological aspect of its intensification, that would be something to watch. Be very fascinating. But it is this next system that we're watching, obviously. It's currently got a lemon on it by the National Hurricane Center. There is shear. There's definitely going to be some shear relevant here. This is a lot of shear. There's no other way to put it. Shear-tastic over the next, 2 to 3 days or so. But it has got a lot of moisture to work. So as long as, it's probably going to tilt the vortex some over the next few days. But then as that fades, Fiona gets out of the way. You can see the shear will start to lessen. Even then it's still relevant, right? Still next, 3-4 days. But then shear starts to go down more and more and more and more. And that's what models are advertising. So that's what we have to watch for. Is the current environment that models are forecasting, is that going to come to fruition? If we get this kind of this kind of outflow and this level, I should say lack of wind shear with the kind of moisture in the environment that's being forecasted, that's when we really start to talk about the potential for this system and then figuring out track after that. Even more, increasing the moisture field on this one. Wow, that is, I just I like to see what's gonna happen. I like to see. I'm not gonna ignore it. Like when I put something out, like when I talk about deterministic modeling, it's always going to be a failure this long out. And when I mean a failure to depict exactly what we're going to be talking about. See, the problem is people don't know how to separate a long range model run from a one of possible many scenarios, and one scenario that could be something in like this in the realm of the area or the or just the overall setup in general, that's really more what I'm looking for in terms of this long range stuff. But people, or I just post it for, for giggles. Like, oh look, Cat 5 coming. Like that will rile some people that are like under 14 years old and don't get sarcasm. That will hit them hard. That's why they probably shouldn't have Twitter or use Twitter for different reasons. Like that just if you're under 14 and you don't get sarcasm, or if you're like even under 16 and you don't get sarcasm at all, like Twitter is not the place for you, my guy. I hate to break it to you, it's just not the place. So when we talk about the long range modeling, or when people post the long range modeling, I don't think they understand, and they're not able to interpret it how other people are possibly able to interpret it. They just don't get it, because we're trying, and it's not their fault, and that's why, as people who know the weather, it's not your job to really post this and make it something like some sort of narrative. Like you have to understand like how you deliver this information to people, or else they're gonna mess it up. You're like, you can mess with people's lives. You can affect their plans. Some people, they're just either a little gullible, but they're just they expect a certain standard of the human race, of people to just deliver information and try to be productive with it. And not everybody is. Some people are not even trying to be bad, and it just, they don't know any better. So being able to relay this information is important. So when I look at this, I'm just looking at it as one possible scenario. That's how I'm looking at this. It's like, oh, interesting. But obviously we see here, with all that being said, so we got a Cat 5 coming. Cat 5, bookmark it. 8 days from now. I'm just kidding. There's a chance one of you missed it. The one of 5 of you in here right now, but appreciate all of you that are in here right now. I know not everyone can be in here at the same time, but winter, I promise you, for the less than 5 of you that are in here right now, I promise you that it is these winter streams, and even with the hurricane streams too, it's just that there's no U.S. impacts. When there's U.S. impacts and people see U.S. impacts, that's, if someone were to come on the stream and just see me 204 hours out just looking at this, they would probably lose their mind and say, oh, you say all this. I'm going to bring it back here because I don't even want to deal with that. But like when we have more immediate U.S. impacts for these hurricanes, if there is, not rooting for it, just saying if there is, and I am rooting for winter impacts. I do want those. I'll tell you that right now. During the winter, this will get popping. I promise you that. Just because there's more people going to be active on social media, and there's going to be more people looking for information. That's just how it works. If it's not affecting them, they're not going to be looking. They're not going to be going out of their way and going out, taking time out of their day to get information that they don't care about. So that's why I completely understand there's not a lot of people. So for the people that are in here right now, I do appreciate it, because that means you got at least a little time on your hands, and you'll spend it listening to me talk. There's probably a lot better things you can do right now than listening to my voice, but at least you're somewhat interested in the weather. It's appreciated. There's a mutual interest in it. I'm glad I can either inform you or just pass along information you already know. But again, with this, bringing it back to this storm, potential storm, I should say. I guess what's working against it in the short term is shear. The storm could not be able to develop to the point where it gets sheared out, and it's not able to create it's not going to be able to create enough thunderstorms to create its own little moisture bubble, and then it starts to really get moving fast, and it just gets tossed aside. We see something like this. Oh, are you kidding me? It just gets, it stays a little bit south latitude, and it kind of just dips in Nicaragua, and probably isn't that strong of a hurricane. We look for this latitude. This latitude in storms becomes a whole lot more relevant in October. It becomes the October is the month we look for this part of the region. Usually, obviously we're going to be looking at this part of the region, but it's like the upper part of the region. And even this is pretty far south now for hurricane development in September. Usually a little bit, it's more Fiona-like. Comes in through the northeastern Caribbean during September. That's a lot of the stuff we see, at least in recent years. But that's probably one of the biggest things working against it, at least in the short term. But if this thing is able to develop, it's going to have to work through some shear. It is, but it's going to have a pretty resilient moisture bubble. It looks like that's being advertised in models, and it's going to be able to fend that off. Some of those dry air intrusions. It's probably going to get tilted. Vortex will get tilted probably somewhat over the next, if it able is to get its act together, some will probably get tilted. It's vortex where we talk about that, where we get the LLC here, and you get your mid-level center. Oh my God, if this thing keeps shrinking on me. Your mid-level center, low-level center. But if you get your low-level center here and your mid-level center here, it's not going to be able to take off. And I can directly show you to that with Recon the Rig. This is what we look for. This is a stacked. Oh, no. This is a stacked system. This is a storm. I want to say perfect. This is probably not perfect, but it's near perfectly stacked at the moment. And that's what we look for hurricanes to be able to take off. So when they get stacked, or close enough to stacked, that's when we look for hurricanes to take off. Or the tropical depression, whatever stage it's at. That's what we look for it to take off. And give us one of these. You can see these rotating walls of convection here. It's covering up the eye at some point. We got eyewall lightning too. I mean, once this is able to really get it's really able, once it's ready, the eye to warm, we're gonna really see this thing take off. And however, how soon that is, I'm not sure whether it's right now at the moment. It's been kind of going back and forth. Usually the first time it shows its eye, that's usually not. It's usually not going to be what you see. It's not going to sustain itself for that long. So at some point, it was I was shocked, that actually it showed its eye for that long, even, which is probably why we saw the rapid development in wind speed and pressure fall. It dropped like 10, 15 millibars. And then, wind speed went up like, 20 miles an hour, like fast, which makes sense. So once the eye warms again, which I can show you here, obviously the eye was a little bit covered at this point. You can see the eye, it makes sense. It was warm, then it had these convective bursts around the center, kind of covering up the eye, which is why we saw the difference in here, and now it was, like here, whatever. It wasn't as significant. When you look for those really, like, the beasts of the beasts, you look for this. Ooh, no. You look for this, the separation to be like here and here. That's what you really look for. And those beasts of the beasts, those big time major hurricanes. And it's not quite there yet, obviously. That's why it's still Cat 2. Strong Cat 2. Borderline major, but When we look for this thing when it's going to be near Cat 4 strength and we'll get recon going through it, that's probably what we're going to look for. But even that, I'd say it's probably pretty close to major right now. I mean, what was the last pass it went through? I got to imagine it was sub 970, right? Yeah, it looks like it was. Get drops on. Go back. We want I. Which one was the I pass? Let's see. Is it this one? No. This one went through the I? No. This one? Here? When did it go through the... Oh, my Lord. Tidbits. Is it really that long? Yeah, I guess it was. Yeah, it hasn't been in the eye in a minute. 968 millibars, so that's its current intensity from the last pass. And it's probably, it was really, the eye was pretty, it wasn't even that, not that. It's the word I was going for. It wasn't even that warm, cleared out. The eye wasn't even that warm at that point. So I bet it's even stronger now. I bet I wouldn't be shocked if it's like 966, 965. Maybe it is still around that intensity because it really hasn't been able to. The eye hasn't been able to really warm. But we got a sub 970 hurricane right now. 968, and it looks like it's getting ready. Looks like it went through this whole path here. Try to get some surrounding. This track will help with data for the models. My guess is they'll probably do one more trip into the eye through here, and then they'll probably, either go out one more time this way through the eye, or actually they probably started from back here more. So this could be their final pass. They might just go through here, whoop, and back out. I'm curious. I'm curious to see how this run played out. I mean, you can see all that dry air. That is a concern down the road. That is a concern down the road, way down the road, for this system to intensify. But if its moisture bubble is big enough, it's not going to be worried too much. As long as the shear is working with its outflow and not against its outflow, it will be able to still intensify. But it looks like it's not that much, which is why it's not able to intensify. It's probably being tilted a lot. Take a look at 500. Let's take a look at the pattern down the road. I mean, it kind of looks like it runs into a weak trough. Looks like it runs into this boundary here. Looks like it runs into this. Oh, that's not the right color we want to choose. Looks like eventually it runs into this boundary. It's been advertised on a few model runs now. It kind of connects with it. So it wraps all this dry air around. And if shear is working against it and not with it, it's not going to allow it to strengthen probably that much. Probably not going to allow it to strengthen too much. So, I mean, this is way down the line, but I'm just curious. At some point, we're going to have to look at this if it's going to be a threat. So why not get ahead of it and be able to get ahead of all this stuff? Even if it's going to change a lot, it will change a lot. I try to explain that to people, but I don't have to explain that to myself. I know I can break down the future without having to answer all these questions because it's my brain. I get to decide what questions I want to ask it. But yeah, when you get all that dry air working against it and shear working against it too, that's probably why you don't see it strengthen too much once it gets off of Cuba. I'll show you again too, because I noticed there wasn't too many people in when I showed it. Which I can't blame you. Can't blame you. I'm not the most interesting person in the world. But if I go back, I'll show you this. I play back. Look at all this boundary that's colliding with it. Looks like. Look at all this dry air. It's probably connected, to this front right here, this trough. What's left over? This front right here, and it's gonna have to meet with that. So at this point, it's strong enough of a storm where it's just gonna, create its own little moisture bubble here. But then you can see dry air starts to wrap around the system into the system. It's probably when it starts to become less tropical. It's probably, at this point, anybody joining, they're seeing me breaking down 250 hours out. They probably think I'm psycho right now, but it's just because I've gone through all of this. I've gone through the short range and through this first. Again, I'm just trying to figure. At some point, I'm going to have to figure this out, and we're going to have to figure this out to see what happens eventually with this system. So just get a head start and look at it. But the environment, the potential environment, it's not what models are showing with the 950 millibar Category 4 hurricane sitting out in the Caribbean. That's what people are going to post about, and they're going to post the radar images of that on the model. But that's not what makes me think that there's a screaming high potential for this. What makes me think that is this ridiculous bubble of moisture, first of all. And it's gonna work with from the start, really. I mean, throughout this whole system, it's got some dry air, obviously, in this spot right here. It's got, at this point, even it's just a tropical wave, or maybe even a weak tropical depression at this point. It's trying to develop it. The GFS is probably the most significant in trying to strengthen this at this point. But then we got this dry air, which is probably limiting its potential to develop as fast as it could if it wasn't there. But there's also wind shear as well, and that's which I'll show again in a second. But it still has a pretty good moisture bubble. And if I play this out, I'll show you that what we're looking at here is the moisture bubble is only increasing. It's not allowing a ton of dry air. Even this is throughout multiple models too. I'll show you the Euro from earlier today. Take a look. It doesn't really develop it as much. This is 18Z still. Regardless, you can see there's not even really a strong Vort signature here at this point. I looked and I saw it already, but it's still got this convective thunderstorm. This area of convective thunderstorms. It's still got a strong moisture bubble, and this dry air sitting back out here and to its side, but it's still able to maintain. A lot of its moisture at this point. So if it's able to hold on, if we don't see this dry air be able to work its way in as it could change in the models, that's what makes me think that this really could be something. And the reason we're not going to see this take off right away, most likely, is we take a look here. It's probably connected to Fiona at least a little bit, but this wind shear, by the Leeward Islands, it's just a bit too much. It's probably going to be working against it, and probably at some point the storm will be moving in a correlated point where it will be beneficial for the outflow. We'll see it intensify, but until it really fades off, where do we want GF? I don't really want that one. I want GFS. Until this wind shear really starts to go away. Again, this is what gets me thinking about the ceiling of the storm. is this lack of wind shear, upper level anticyclone that it's going to be close to. That's what makes me thinking about the potential of this system. And again, you'll probably just see the people posted on Twitter, the, what's it even called? The P-type maps. That's what you'll probably see on Twitter. You won't see, you will see them talking. You'll see the people who you want to get your information of. They'll be talking about this. And matter of fact, that's what I'm going to post even. I'll post it right now. You get to see me live tweet right now. Did this last night too. Putting together a banger of a tweet right now. That's not really what I think about when I'm tweeting, to be honest. I don't really think about what's going to get the most likes. I'm thinking about, well, this is what I'm looking at right now. This is what's interesting to me. So when I post this, is this going to be some good content for people that's going to be informative? It's less about good content that people are going to like and retweet. It helps when people like and retweet it, that more people can see it, more people come to the page, and I'm not against that, obviously. Almost have 5,000 followers at this point, but it's not quite what I'm looking for. And it's not quite why I joined Twitter in the first place. I joined Twitter to learn. And as ironic as that may sound, given the platform and the depths of Twitter you can go into. Let me get back here. Even though actually we'll do this. I'm pretty sure there's like no one on the stream right now, but that's okay. We'll go back here. We'll even do screenshots. Boom. We'll have that, so we'll boom delete. If I don't think anyone else is going to show up, so I guess we'll call it. We'll call it a stream. Appreciate everyone that showed up and everyone that's listening to what I'm talking at this moment, which is no one presently. Maybe someone when they look back through my stream. I appreciate you all that came in. It means a lot given that it's not incredibly active right now. There's no present U.S. threats, but appreciate everyone that comes in. New mic. Excited about that. It's good to test it out. I'll listen to it after. Initially, it sounded good. I wasn't able to see how clear it sounded, but it sounded good, which is good news. And we'll be able. Can't wait. I can't wait for the winter streams for sure. That is what I can't wait for. So hopefully you all have a good night, and I'll be posting this on Twitter in a second. Peace.